Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It is Friday, April 21st, 10 a.m. here on the East Coast of Long Island, actually the East Coast of the country, but I'm on Long Island. I am a sales coach and trainer. I work with both individuals and organizations to help them get measurable and sustainable sales increases. And as many of you know, I founded the Sales Pro Network as a place to elevate the profession of sales, a place where salespeople can come and hang out, network with each other, learn from each other, ask questions, and get great coaching. And every Friday at 10 a.m., we either do a live training or a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And once again, my friends, today is no exception. Before I introduce our guest, if you're watching us live, please say hello. If you're watching us live on Facebook and have not connected your account to StreamYard, it's just going to say Facebook user, so please put your name in there. If you have any questions for our guest during the show, please do put them in the comments, and I'll be sure to pass them on to him and get your answers. And finally, if you're watching us on the replay, please put replay in the comments. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to John Selig. He's the founder of Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Happy Friday. Good to be here.
Woohoo! Good to have you, my friend. And I can't wait to speak to you. If anybody who's listened to this more than once knows I take every chance to say, yes, I'm a stand-up comedian, but you're actually a real stand-up comedian. You've done it for years and years. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background and what brought you up to this point, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I think the best way to introduce myself is half sales guy, John Selig, half sales guy, half stand-up comedian, all parental disappointment. And, to sort of like maybe give a little bit more context to how you introduced me. I never set out to be a full-time comedian, but I was in tech sales for years and years. And I just sort of, felt, do I want to do this the rest of my life? And I started doing comedy, much like you, as kind of like I want to try this. I need a creative outlet. I was just a little bit bored with finding out if CIOs needed data warehousing solutions. Like it just sort of, it wasn't connecting with me after a while. And I wanted to kind of go in different directions, not necessarily to become a professional comedian, but just to learn some new skills, meet some new people, just completely do a 180 in life. And I got addicted to the process, as we like to say. And I performed stand-up for about 11 years. I haven't officially retired, but right now I'm on a, I don't know if it's a hiatus or even an extended hiatus. It's been about 9 months since I last performed. I think about it every day. But really what I've done is I've kind of merged my stand-up comedy and sales backgrounds, because as I like to say, sales is stand-up without the 2-drink minimum, unless you bomb or kill your quarter. And also stand-up comedy is sales, but with a much crappier comp plan. So I found, like, the first time I went on stage, and you could probably attest to this, I'm willing to bet that your sales background has helped you quite a bit with tackling stand-up comedy audiences, hopefully not physically. But I found that the two were really similar, and the skills I learned in sales helped me as a stand-up comedian, helped me understand what's going on, and not to figure out how to be funny all the time, but it helped me sort of figure out how can I better connect with my audience, how can I better relate to them. And my sales, my stand-up skills have ultimately helped me become a better salesperson as I market myself and sell myself for Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams.
Yeah, my sales skills, I think, certainly help. But what really helped me, I think, are my sales training skills, because as opposed to many first-time comedians who've never been on a stage before, I'd been on stages for years and years and years. So I often am told, wow, you look so comfortable up there. Yeah, I've lived there for a long time. I'm not the typical guy going up with my hand shaking. And, as we were speaking about earlier, I respect anybody who has the courage to get on stage, even if they suck, because it's a terrifying thing. Yes? Initially.
I know for most people it is. For me, I wasn't terrified. I was nervous, absolutely nervous. You're right. But I wasn't terrified. To me, far more terrifying is getting up in front of, your regional team to let them know which deals are going to come in and why, and lying through your teeth to get through the meeting and hoping that they don't know that. To me, that was the most terrifying thing, because in sales, in comedy, if you bomb, people will forget you 2 minutes later. Let's always remember that. If we bomb as open mic comedians, or even as professional comedians, they're not going to really remember too much unless it was just a catastrophe. But in sales, if we bomb, we lose our jobs. So that to me is far more terrifying. But to your point, yes, most people find it absolutely terrifying. I was nervous and anxious, I guess, is maybe the better word than terrified.
Got it. Good morning, Bruce Caseman. Good morning, Pete Ekstrom. Glad to have you here. Brian Keith McNeil, the sales confidence coach. Chip Helm, glad to see you with us. And Brian says, I know that more stand-up comedians need to understand that to build a sustainable career, they need to be able to sell themselves. Well, that's certainly true. John, you're the founder of Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams. What's that all about? How do you help or work with salespeople and and marketing teams in a way that where your comedy background helps you and helps them?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the evolution. The evolution was, I had a bit of a project in travel and comedy in the mid-teens, let's call it, and was producing these overseas fundraiser comedy shows in Latin America. I was trying to raise money for nonprofits, which I did with live English comedy for tourists and expats. And I had a bit of a business model, but I wasn't able to execute it. It sounds like I want to travel and do comedy, and I want to figure out how to make a living doing that sort of stuff. And that was a really bold dream, which I couldn't fully execute on. So when I wrapped that up, I'm like, what am I going to do? And I felt I could become a speaker. So much like you, we're in front of people quite a bit. And I said I could sort of translate my comedy background, bring it back to merge it with my sales experiences, and bestow a bunch of lessons upon sales teams. And my keynote is still part of everything I do. But I decided to extend that out a little bit. And I'll give you guys a bit of an anecdote, if I may. I used to sell business applications for Oracle, so ERP and all the associated business software tools. And I was doing a demo, whereas as the sales guy, I don't deliver the demo. I don't understand anything about global financial consolidation, and my sales engineer was delivering the demo. And at some point during the demonstration, he dropped a short, quick joke on what sucks about the way they're doing it today. And the customer laughed, and I said, and he's a really dry sales engineer, but he threw this one joke in, and they all laughed, and all of a sudden, like the mood and the tone changed. And I said, that's a magic trick. I don't know how he did that. He probably just made it up on the spot, just said it spontaneously. But we had another demo for the exact same solution another month later, and he dropped the exact same joke, and I realized he's been doing this for years. Wow. So what comes off as spontaneous is not at all. And that's what people's perception of stand-ups are. They think we're making it up as we go along, but it's not. It's scripted. It's tried. It's failed. It's not even quite tested. It's iterated. It fails again. We iterate it again. Then it starts to get a little better. It starts to take shape if we know what we're doing, and there's actually some gravitas behind it. And I felt that, if salespeople had short, quick jokes that could highlight their relevance to their buyers, either what the problem is or what are the impacts of not selling a problem. If they could paint a picture to show prospects, hey, I know why we're on this call today, and I know your pain and I know your struggles, that they'd be able to connect in a much more human fashion, but also build that trust and credibility in a way that their competitors can't. So I said, let's teach salespeople to write short, quick jokes, not about the weather, not about dating, not about airplane food, but about their relevance to their prospects, i.e., what problems do they eliminate for them? What happens if they don't solve them? Who's affected by those pain points? You could bake all kinds of good information into a short, quick 1 or 2 liner. And to be clear, when I say jokes, I don't mean a rabbi, a minister, and a priest walk into a bar and say a bunch of offensive things to each other, like a long-winded story that our great uncle tells us at the Thanksgiving table. That's not what I'm talking about. 1 or 2 liners, short, quick jokes, paint pictures. And so I put together Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams to get sellers to learn from each other, grab business insights from each other, and go through a creative process to assemble those short, quick messages. I kind of show them how jokes work, and I get them up there performing their jokes for their peers. And then I help them adapt those jokes for prospecting efforts, demos, what have you.
And that's what you call short form humor, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like a 1 or 2 liner, classic Rodney Dangerfield style jokes that aren't more than 3 sentences max, but typically 1 or 2.
Mitch Tobel, one of my favorite marketing guys in the world and a good friend, says, I love that joke. And I'm guessing this is Valerie Heffron. There you go. Yes, I love this approach. We need more laughter everywhere. And she says, hi, Jensen. Hello, Beach Bug. That's my dog. Something you said a few moments ago really rang true. When I took my first comedy class, one of the things that the instructor first said, he goes, this might ruin comedy for you. And while it certainly didn't ruin it for me, it was a real eye opener when I discovered that people like Richard Pryor and George Carlin, people like that who I held up as gods, did not just get on stage and start rambling brilliantly. They actually know it was a real surprise to me that you got to know what you're doing. You can't get on stage for 20 minutes or a half an hour or an hour and just ramble.
I would agree with that 99% of the way. I think if you have a certain gravitas in the stand-up comedy world, you can go to an open mic. People are excited to see you because they know who you are, and you can ramble. They'll probably laugh at your stuff, even if your ideas are nowhere near baked. But getting it out and getting that reaction from the audience can help them mold it, especially in this iPhone, smartphone era where we can record everything and go back and listen and find what were they connecting with. But to your point, yes, the magic of stand-up is they make it look like they're just talking to us, but it's all really scripted. Sure, they might have to deal with a heckler here and there, or call out something that's going on in the room, and that's spontaneous. But the jokes, the material, they are not making it up as they go along.
I've even noticed that for me, I find myself like turning a certain way at the same time and just kind of fall into a routine. It's pretty fascinating. So are you claiming that you make people funnier?
God, no. Not at all. Fun? Did you say funny or funnier?
Funnier.
I think what I do is designed to help. If someone has, it's really a ground zero with the ability to make people laugh, but they have even the slightest modicum of a sense of humor, i.e. they can laugh at people's jokes, or they can repeat a joke that they heard on television, or they can occasionally say something funny in the moment. My goal is to make everybody the slightest bit funnier, just the slightest, maybe a hair funnier. And some people I can make a little bit funnier. But the one thing I do not promise is to make anyone funny, because that, the ability to be funny, I think is something that is baked into not just our DNA, but our life experiences, the people we grew up with, the pain and the turmoil we might have gone through, and how we've coped with it, who our friends were, all this kind of stuff. So I don't claim to make people funny, but I do think that people can work on getting even the slightest bit funnier, but there's some work involved. We all know that.
Yes, indeed there is. And I have a standard line I've used many times when I teach cold calling. I tend to use humor when I'm training, and people often in the class or the audience, they think, oh, Jeff's being funny, I could be funny too. And my standard line is, everybody thinks they're funny. Most of you aren't. So you mentioned that it's evolved into something more than joke writing workshop for sellers. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So when I started this, like I said, my goal was to arm salespeople with like a quick bullet. And in comedy, like a bullet is just like this short one-liner that's money, right? That makes a powerful point, impresses, makes an impression upon our audience, or in this case, I like to say our prospects, our micro audiences. I just want to address one thing quickly. You said earlier that you weren't nervous, or you were a little bit prepared for stand-up because you, as a sales trainer, you were on a stage. But I also want to make it clear to salespeople that we're always on a stage, right? Like the moment we cold call someone and they answer the call, it's like we grab the mic on an open mic. We are on stage. They're like, hello. They want to hear something, and they want to react one way or the other to it. Whether we're doing a demo, whether we're doing a full sales presentation, we're always on the stage too. Not quite to the same degree that you and I are, where we're speaking publicly to a massive group of people, but most people who are never in sales and never speak to people one-on-one in their jobs, like out of the blue, especially, they really don't understand that feeling of being on a stage. So to everybody who's listening or who will be listening, you're on stages more than you realize. So when I started this, the goal was to get sellers to kind of have a short, quick joke that highlights their relevance to buyers, that triggers emotions and highlights, what problems they solve and makes them seem trustworthy and credible. And I put them through a process to do that, because most people have never thought about how do you craft a joke. They don't even realize that jokes or humor is written, it's assembled, it's crafted.
Painfully.
Say that again.
Often painfully.
Yes.
Like giving birth. It's like, here's an idea. Oh, that's funny. Now, how do I get it there? How do I get it so that the funny in my head actually translates to other people and makes them laugh?
Personally, it's been a while since I've delivered children, so I'm not going to claim it's like a birth. But at the same time, I understand the analogy. Yes, it's hard, right? It's definitely a challenge. So I did a gig with a client where I worked with a team of 15 new logo reps, and I got them all telling jokes at their QBR about managing global privacy compliance efforts. Really dry, boring stuff. Privacy officers and marketing and CMOs, they're trying to manage like everything to do with cookies, because like cookie law, privacy law is always changing, and companies are always getting dinged for that, and it's damaging their reputation. They have to pay big fines. Really boring stuff, and they manage it all in spreadsheets. Really boring. And I got all the reps telling jokes about what sucks about managing in spreadsheets or not keeping up with the changing laws. And it went really well. The rest of the go-to-market team all laughed at these jokes. I told some jokes. And I had a debrief with the CRO after. And I said, so what'd you think of this? And he leans in and he's a bit of a gruff guy. He's like, look, I don't want to tell you how to run your business. Then he goes, but. And then I'm like, oh, he hated this. He goes, I didn't care about the jokes. He says, but what I love that you did was you got our reps expressing what problems they solved for who in simple English, and 7 of them hadn't even started on the job. So they were ready to hit the phones quicker than my past reps were. He says the ramp time was really good. The new reps did well in their first quarter, and so did the rest of the team. And they even closed business off of some of the jokes in cold email that we used in cold email. So it's definitely more than jokes. I kind of like to say that I use the joke writing process as a mechanism to help sellers master, again, what problems do we solve? What happens if they don't solve the problems? Classic sales stuff. What are compelling events? Why do companies choose to change or go in a different direction? And also master who is their buyer, right? Everything about their buyer. What are their objectives? Who are their stakeholders? How do these pain points affect everyone's emotions? And which emotions are being triggered by the problems? Because good comedy, if we unpack a little comedy nerd theory, good humor is rooted in truth, pain, and absurdity. Those 3 things. And the problems that plague our customers, or our prospects, I should say, and formerly our customers, were hurting them. And they were absurd because there's always somebody in an organization who's like, I've been whining to the CEO for 4 years that we need to fix this because it's causing A, B, and C. And the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over, making no adjustments, expecting different results. So there's an absurdity, there's a pain, and you know what they say, it's funny because it's true. So by getting reps to write these kind of jokes, again, it's good if a couple of them can learn how to master delivering a joke or using it in their cold outreach or what have you. But the journey forces them to master all kinds of business acumen and helps them boost their written and communication skills and confidence.
And Brian McNeil, who is a great trainer in his own right and who loves going to comedy clubs. He's always posting pictures about that. Says, absolutely, we are on stage performing. Top sellers perform. And good morning, Lisa Levitan. What are some of the things sellers can learn from bad comedians?
So when I started comedy, you're doing, and Jeff, you can relate to this. We're at a lot of open mics with a lot of bad comedians.
Yes.
When I started in 2011, there weren't that many open mics going on in Montreal. Comedy's undertaken like a big boom in the last, 10, 11, 12 years. Maybe it's not a coincidence that I got into it just as the boom was happening, because I'm not a trendsetter, I'm a follower. So with that said, at the open mics I was doing, particularly at my local club, a lot of the bigger comics would come and work on their stuff, the local comics. And at the same time, there's first-time newbies. There's guys who've been around a little while who aren't getting anywhere. The ones who have been around as long as I have and don't go anywhere, those are the ones I learn the most from. The newbies, they're brand new. They don't know what the hell they're doing. But at the same time, it's really transparent what they're doing wrong. But the people who keep doing the same bad things over and over and don't grow and don't evolve, those are the comedians I learned the most from, to say, you know what, I don't want to do what they're doing. And the first one is they don't know their audience. And so, and I'm going to tie another one in. They also don't listen. So there's one guy locally. He's been doing comedy longer than me. He's still around. And I remember he did a show I produced, and it was a room. I used to produce a room for visitors to Montreal, for travelers, and some of them are foreigners. And he would ask the audience, "Hey, who here is into professional wrestling?" And nobody raised their hand. And his attitude was, "Well, guess what? I got 5 minutes on this anyway." And he did it. I mean, like, that's really disrespectful, right? Like, that shows you just don't care about your audience. You care about yourself. You're not here for them. You're making it all about you. And I mean, a good comedian, a smart comedian, would know, even going into the room, that I can't tell that material there, because they're probably not going to get it. Maybe one or two people out of an audience of 20 or 25 will really appreciate this niche thing I'm about to talk about. But he's been doing that forever. Still does it. So he doesn't care about the audience. He doesn't take the time to ever like say, who are these people and what's important to them? And how can I relate to them and show them I understand them? So he doesn't know how to listen. He doesn't know how to read the room / know his buyer, let's just say, because stand-up comedy audiences, they're buyers for us. If they watch us at an open mic, they might say, well, that guy's or that girl is really funny. I'm going to find out where they're performing next. Or if they have a social media presence, I'm going to follow them. We got to get them to invest in us. And they don't always, if we don't relate to them and we don't make them laugh, they're not going to, right? So those are kind of, I highlighted 3 key things right there. They don't know their audience, they don't listen, and they don't know how to be relevant and sort of trigger those emotions with their audiences. A couple of other things is, I watched some open micers or some bad comedians come out there, and they would tell a long-winded story for about 2 minutes with no punchlines in it anywhere along the way. And by the time they hit their big punchline in their mind, faces in the audience would light up, but not because they're laughing. It's because they're on their phones, right? Like, have you ever experienced that blue light from the stage where you see someone's kind of looking at their phone?
Not yet, but I get it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, then you're doing really well, because I mean, I've seen it. I've definitely seen it. People just on their phones, like while I'm up there working on a new bit, and I get it. It's because I'm not holding their attention. They don't care what I have to say. Happens. And some people, you just can't stop, can't control their phone addiction. That's a different story. And so I watch these newer comedians or poor comedians just ramble. Whereas I realized really quickly, I need to hook them within 15 seconds. I need to make them laugh, because if we don't earn their attention, make them laugh and build our credibility really quick, they won't trust us. So for years, my opening joke is that I look like Elliot Gould / Ross and Monica's dad. And I'm so tired of telling that joke, but it gets people on my side really quickly. And I learned how to tell a couple of those short, quick ones before going into sort of some longer winded territory, let's call it. The best comedians have tons of confidence. They might appear like they have no confidence, but they have tons of it. And I don't care how good your material is, when you can't show up with a little confidence and sell it to the audience, it's not going to fly. And I've watched some comedians whose writing is terrible, who have no good jokes, but they're just so confident that they can get people to laugh with just puffing their chest out and talking a certain way. And I'm like, there's no joke there. That's not funny, but the audience loves it. So who am I to say it's not funny? They don't prepare. That's another one. I watched some comedians just get up there and say, like, I don't rehearse. I just get up on stage. Comedians, these are open micers or people who aren't succeeding. They just get up there and it's like, I don't need to prepare. I like to fly by the seat of my pants. This isn't improv. Practice a little bit. Maybe we can't anticipate everything that's going to happen on stage. I think just as well as I do, that no matter how much we practice, the moment we get up there and grab the microphone, there's a million things going on in our head, and it never unfolds according to plan. But the more we can narrow that gap to reduce the unexpected and control the controllable, the better chance of success we have. And I want to tie 2 concepts together. When we can make them laugh in that first 15 seconds, and we get that big laugh, that comedy theory is used like one of your best short, quick jokes to start your set. Get them on board early. While they are laughing, we can compose ourselves and think about what we're going to say next. That 2 or 3 second period where they're laughing is a long time for us. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. And my openers, anybody here married, or is everybody happy? Boom, 3 seconds. And that was what you said. I mean, everything you said was absolutely true in my experience. The first class I took, the first thing the instructor told me, he goes, "Wow, you love telling stories." I said, "I really do." He goes, "Shorten them." He just cut line after line after line. He goes, "You got to get to the punch quick." Not just that first one, but people don't want to sit. Jerry Seinfeld, they'll sit and listen to anything he says. But me, they paid 20 or 30 or 40 bucks and a 2-drink minimum to laugh. They didn't come to hear me just expound. And the other thing I love that you said is know your audience. I made a crucial error one time, which I haven't made since. Are you familiar with Chabad?
Absolutely.
So I did a talk. I was hired to do a motivational talk for 300 Chabad rabbis from across the country. And I'm like, I'm Jewish. I get it. And in my motivational talk, I make a lot of references to The Godfather, Seinfeld, things like that. And nothing is getting a laugh. Absolutely nothing. And one of the rabbis comes up to me afterwards, "Jeff, did you notice we weren't laughing at anything you said?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I did, and I'm not used to that. What did I do wrong?" He goes, "We don't watch TV and we don't go to movies." Would have been a good thing to know before I started making references to TV shows and movies before I spoke to Chabad.
You know what? It's I would say that's an extreme example because you don't hang out with these guys every day. I think the example I would use to make the point, and I should have said it earlier, is when I started comedy, I was using some pop culture references like you that were dated for younger audiences, like even Simpsons references, which I grew up with. It's kind of a dated phenomenon for Gen Y and Gen Z. And there, a lot of the times, they're the ones coming out to the shows I was doing right when I started. They're the ones who were looking for cheap entertainment. So a $5 open mic night. And I'd watch some guys older than me hearkening back to stuff from the 70s. It's like, this is light years away from even when they were born. So we need to look at who's in the room, size them up, and start to do the math after a few sets. It maybe takes a few sets to figure out who's coming to the shows that I do and start to tailor our material specifically for them, their challenges in life, and their sphere of reference.
So in sales and comedy, you better know your audience. A dear comedy friend of mine, she does a brilliant Joan Rivers. She dresses up like her. The impression is spot on. And she asked me to come videotape a gig for her, which I did. Nobody in the audience knew who Joan Rivers were. Nothing. I'm sitting there hysterical from everything she said. Everybody's like, "What do you talk? Can we talk?" Nothing. Unbelievable. You say that successful sellers and marketers need to trigger or invoke their prospects' emotions. Why is emotion so important? We hear this all the time. Why is emotion so important?
I don't know. It's just psychology. It's science, right? Like we react viscerally to things that make us anxious, make us afraid, make us nervous is another word, or just to make us angry. I mean, that's classic advertising 101, right? Like it's all treads on our emotions. People shop with emotions, but they buy with rationale. So as the first step in getting deals done is prospecting and getting people into that funnel, gaining interest, right? So attention, interest, decision, I think it's authority. I forget. I never know these acronyms. But attention is the first one. And how do we get attention? We trigger people's emotions. If people love something, they might pay attention. And if they hate it, they might pay attention. And that's kind of why social media is so successful, because it gets people outraged or excited.
And you may be too young for this one, I'm not sure, but Mr. Whipple used to be the guy on the Charmin commercials. Too young for that one?
No comment. I don't want to out myself.
Well, Mr. Whipple was the manager in a grocery store, and he used to walk over to people and say, "Please don't squeeze the Charmin." And it's like, I freaking hate Mr. Whipple, except you know what? Charmin stuck out in my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's it. That's exactly it. And I mean, look, some of the best ads throughout history, you know, that's why people remember them. It's because they triggered an emotion with them.
Yep. What are some of the ingredients that we need to elicit emotional reactions from prospects?
It's pretty much everything I understood. If we look at, look, we sell stuff, right? We sell products, we sell solutions, we sell services, whatever we sell. I mean, I go to some tech conferences, and often the booths. I like to prospect at the booths and just figure out what's going on because they're all my potential prospects. And I'll say to whoever's manning the booth, what problem do you solve for who? Because they have a name that I don't understand. Their company's name is like Schmizza or Ziegler. Sorry, that's not a good example because of the sales training thing, but Ziggles or something. And we don't know what these guys do, right? Ziggles.ai. I don't ask them, what do you guys do? I say, what problem do you solve for who? And they launch immediately into, we're an AI-driven engagement platform. We 10x scalability. And I'm like, you didn't answer my question. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what problem do you solve? And these are usually kind of SDRs, AEs in their early to mid 20s, even early 30s. They just look at me like I'm from another planet. Like, well, don't you want to see the demo? I'm like, no, I just want to know what your relevance is to the people here. Like, why should they care about you? What's driving them nuts, and how do you eliminate that for them? Because the stuff that drives our prospects nuts that we can eliminate is triggering their frustration, their anger, their anxiety, their fears. And again, if we can eliminate that stuff for them so they could, sleep better at night, then their world is going to be better, and we're going to have a better shot of making their lives better and getting them to like us, all that kind of stuff. So, I like to think that those parallels, the emotional connection that sellers need to make is tied directly to what stand-ups have to do.
What about noise? We're all bombarded with sales messages and advertising a zillion times a day. How do we stand out and break through all that noise? So
what's funny is this business that I'm been describing to you guys has gone through such an evolution, and breaking through the noise and standing out was actually one of those early like value props of mine. Now I don't even talk about it because everyone talks about how do you break through the noise, how do you stand out. And so again, I was telling that story about my CRO client. He said the real value of this is kind of the enablement piece and the business acumen, and he listed all these other skills. And I realized, you know what? I'll talk about breaking through the noise and standing out if people want to hear it. It is a use case I talk about. But again, good joke structure is short. And so like I cold call myself these days, and I have this go-to opener when I'm calling up a chief revenue officer, a technology company, and a classic challenge is that sales and marketing, they operate in silos. Would you agree with that? Yep. So my go-to opener is, hey, Jeff, this is John Selig. We've never spoken before. So this call is colder than the relationship between sales and marketing. And you know what? It doesn't always get the laugh. It does get laughs, but it doesn't always get the laugh. But either way, I get their time and attention.
And isn't that the key?
That's all I'm looking for. I'm not dying to make them laugh. I want them to, because then I'm really proving my own worth. But as long as I'm an interrupt of some kind, a so-called pattern interrupt, I'm saying something that's relevant, that again triggers that emotion, and lets them know that this is a cold call. I'm doing 3 things in like 10 seconds.
I think we've got a budding stand-up in the audience. Every time I take my dog to the park, the ducks try to bite him. That's what I get for buying a purebred dog. Okay. Somebody who's going for the grown, obviously. And good morning, Yo Landau. Good to see you with us, my friend. You say humor is formulaic. Can anyone be funny?
Well, I think anyone could be trained to deliver a joke. I don't know if they can always process the beat from a delivery perspective that will sell the joke. That I don't necessarily teach that, right? I tell them you do have to practice. I give them demonstrations of why things are funny, but I can't force them to do it. I can't even force them, even if they practice, to get it. Right? Some people I think have it in their DNA to understand a comedic beat, and some don't. And so I think more people than we realize can be trained to tell one joke over and over in a way that gets the reaction they want. I do believe that. I don't know what the stats are, though.
Got it. What are some of the different types of jokes? Isn't a joke a joke?
Well, there's one-liners that compare one thing to another. There's the classic rule of 3s. Look, good jokes subvert expectations. So it starts off in one direction. People think you're dropping some information about this, you're leading them on, and then you sort of take them in some, you take a left turn with them and they didn't see it coming. And that's the magic of comedy. like classic Rodney Dangerfield joke. My doctor told me to watch my drinking, so now I drink in front of a mirror. And those of you familiar with the Rodney character, he's a lush, right? So we think that he's just cutting back, and he subverts all our expectations with that punchline. So that's a tough kind of joke to master. That's not something that everyone can get. But there's always creative comparison jokes where you're comparing two very different things, where one word is like the hinge, let's just say, or the anchor, the fulcrum point. And then there's rule of threes, which is kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield joke, where you present some information, the punchline comes in a list format. You list two things they're expecting to hear, and the third goes in this completely different direction. So let's see if I can remember this joke. I worked with Citrix, and they wanted to write jokes about mobile phone security. And the joke was, you need to forgive me for this. I'm not going to get it right, but let's just try it anyway and destroy my credibility in the process. You don't want people from outside your company viewing sensitive data on your employee's phone. Like, you don't want them seeing data on a bus, at a restaurant, or one stall over. And so it's just, they didn't expect that. It's a little bit of a left turn. It's a little bit of a pattern interrupt. Didn't get the reaction I wanted, but everyone jokes they're like grown-up rich kids. They don't all work.
My favorite comedians are always the ones where you don't see the punchline coming. I think it's what makes Anthony Jeselnik so brilliant. If you're familiar with him, I never ever see the punchline coming. It's always from left field. It's like, whoa, I wish I could do that. He's just brilliant.
Can I add one thing about Anthony Jeselnik? I was just listening to another comedy podcast. This is a family podcast, clearly, Jeff. So we're not going to repeat some of the things these guys say, but it's what's it called? We Might Be Drunk with Sam Morrill and Mark Normand. And if you guys like, not Jeselnik, but if you like a little bit more edgier comedy, but good joke writing, like classic joke structure, these guys are both masters. And they were talking about Jeselnik, and they are pros. They are master joke writers. And they say that they can't see where he's going. Like they try to guess it. I guessed one of his jokes once. I was pretty proud of myself. One time I saw what he was doing, and I got it right. But they're masters, and they I'm sure they can get it here and there themselves, but they claim that like they don't see it coming, and that's the brilliance.
Yeah, it keeps me on the edge every single time, and it's like, wow, how do I learn to write like that? Just brilliant. And speaking of writing, there's a fine line between being funny and being offensive, especially today. I mean, people are just waiting to be offended. How do we navigate the line between what we can and cannot say to a prospect?
Well, I mean, look, we got to use our judgment first and foremost. Look, it's no religion, no nothing about anyone's cultural background, no the P word. We don't want to go anywhere near the P word. We don't want to insult, whoever you think is the worst politician in the world could be someone else's favorite. So we don't want to talk about politics. We don't want to include anything about sex, gender, bodily functions. I mean, use your judgment, people. Like, just keep it clean, keep it business. We don't need to the best comedians in the world, the most successful comedians in the world don't offend. They're highlighting things that are hyper relevant and painful to people.
Yeah, I talked about the first comedy course I took. In the second one, the instructors insisted everything we write was 100% clean for this particular course. And I struggled because I talk about bodily functions and parts and things like that in my routine. I'm like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Of course, I managed to come up with a 7-minute completely clean routine. And then, of course, first thing, at the graduation, you take the stage and you get to perform your set. And first 10 seconds, the F-bomb comes out of my mouth because I just couldn't tell myself. But it's a challenge.
I was just going to say that like comedians swear because they're nervous. A lot of them they're just nervous, and it's a release on stage to cope with the nerves. And I mean, we're all raised differently, right? We all have different language patterns. Some people were raised with no swearing. Some people were raised around a lot of swearing. It's just part of their talk track in everyday life. So, but to your point, it's so much harder to write a clean set than it is to go to poopy jokes and sex jokes and stuff like that. That's where most people's minds go. My dad's 85. If I show him comedy and it doesn't involve something like we just discussed, he doesn't find it funny.
Well, he must love Sarah Silverman.
I think he would like her. He's just got to watch her. But whenever I tell him to check out a new comedian, he's not interested at this point because I've destroyed my credibility with him.
Got it. You recently posted on LinkedIn about how you set a self-imposed quota or objective in your comedy career. And you gave an example of how you would reverse engineer to create a plan. What are some of the steps you used in your comedy career, and how does that relate to sales?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing comedy for a couple of years and I realized, like, okay, I don't really have any objectives here. I was trying to get funnier and figure it out, get on stages. I was trying to impress people. I was trying to impress myself a little bit too. But then after a while, your first goal, the first advice you get from most professional comedians is develop 5 tight minutes. You've heard that one?
Yeah.
Great. And why do we want to develop 5 tight minutes?
You tell me.
So we can impress maybe a booker for a show, even if it's just a show at a bar, because we want more stage time. We want to do more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes after a while seems like nothing. And you're kind of like, I'm giving up my whole night to do 5 minutes on stage. But it takes time to get to that 5 minutes. So let's just work with the 5-minute objective. When you started the first time on stage, how many laughs would you say you got in that 5 minutes?
Oof. 5 minutes, 10, maybe 15 if I was lucky. I've been told that the goal is a laugh every 10 seconds.
10? No, it's more like today in 2020, today in 2023. I think I always heard it was like a laugh every 20 seconds. Look, in my first 5 minutes, I don't know. I did well my first time. I don't know. I'm sure I probably got 10 laughs in 5 minutes, maybe, if I was lucky. I don't know. I never.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but all I know was, I did 20 sets. I wasn't getting 10 laughs in 5 minutes. I was getting maybe 3 laughs or 4 laughs in 5 minutes. And I realized I need to up that. And so as a result, I'm like, how do I get to 5 tight minutes, get way more laughs than the 5 minutes? And like we talked about earlier, I'd record myself. I'd map it out. What am I saying that they don't need to hear? What syllables and words can I cut out? How can I get there quicker? And also, which of these jokes that I've been harping on that aren't getting laughs should I just give up on because they're not funny in the first place? So got to prospect more. Got to go to more open mics. Got to throw a bunch more crap against the wall and see what's sticking. And when something does stick, you got to work the deal, as we say in sales, right? How do I then, once they find a concept funny, how do I pare it down so that it's only taking up 10, 15, 20, 45 seconds in my whole bit? Maybe it's two, 3 jokes I can squeeze in there about one thing. So after you get the 5 minutes down, then you got to figure out, how do I get 8 minutes down? How do I get 10 minutes down? How do I get 15 minutes down? And you got to keep doing this process. And the bigger your quota is, the more prospecting you got to do, the more sales calls you got to take, i.e. how more open mics you got to go to, the more sets you got to do, or maybe you slide the new joke in between 3.5 good minutes of true, tried, tested, and true material. Work one new one in the middle. If it bombs, okay, then go back to the good stuff. And it's all just this process towards building that 15 minutes. I like to use 15 minutes because that's a healthy target for younger comedians. Try and get 15 minutes in your first, let's say, 2 or 3 years. Back in the day, before there was a lot of open mics, professional comedians were shooting for 5 new minutes a year. Now they need to turn over 60 minutes a year so they can shoot a new special every year.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's kind of what I mean by reverse engineering. Like, in comedy, it's really similar to your sales quota. What's your number? How are you going to get there? In sales, we have to figure out what accounts are we going to tackle, what products are we going to offer to them, what are the opportunities in the marketplace, how many calls do we need to make, how many meetings do we need to have, how many demos, if that's what you're selling, something that involves a demo. You got to reverse engineer based on the number. How am I going to get to that number? What are my activities going to be?
Absolutely. In another recent post on LinkedIn, you quoted comedian David Spade. He was talking about doing corporate gigs, and he said, CEOs often tell me to make a bunch of jokes about their company, but he never complies. And you would think that wanting a corporate gig, you'd want to do that. He said they think it's easy to do 10 or 15 minutes of stand-up about your boring company. I don't know anyone here. I don't know how it works. But you said you could help him. How would you help David Spade?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of a part of what I do when I'm not doing trainings and workshops. I do humor as a service, where I put on my business consulting hat, because I think the best salespeople are consultants. I don't think they're product hawkers. And understanding, and I've worked in consulting as well. So, what business are you in? What problems do you solve? Who's affected by them? I kind of apply my own methodology that I deliver to a sales team to try and gather information, understand what key points do they want to impress upon those prospects. And then I go away and I write them 20, 30 jokes. And not all of them are going to be great, but sort of like the funnel approach, which we haven't even talked about, or we've alluded to. If I can write 30 jokes and 6 or 7 of them get big laughs, that's money right there. And I try and run them by my clients before I ever deliver them in public. But I've delivered them at the end of some of my sessions, my keynotes, where I'm like, hey guys, I wrote some jokes about the problems you solve and how they impact your prospects. And some of them are pretty good and some of them suck. So that's how I'd help David Spade. But he's alluding to the fact that most people have no clue how comedians work and what their process is to develop that act. And they think we're making it up as we go along, and that we're brilliant people who can just look at people and make fun of them, or dig in deep to subject matter and make something funny about it.
It's all, for me at least, it's almost like getting to be on stage is the reward you get for the hard work you put in the writing. And I think I might have shared this with you when I first spoke to you. Well, not first spoke to you, but spoke to you about doing this interview. I did a gig, I don't know, about 8 months ago, something like that, in a comedy club here on Long Island. And I'm at the table at the back of the room with all the comedians, and I'm sitting right across from a guy. And in my head, I'm going, that looks just like Kevin James. I'll bet he hears this all the time. And as I'm just about to say, do people tell you look like Kevin James all the time? Somebody walks over and says, can I have your autograph, Mr. James? So I'm sitting across the table from Kevin James, and I don't realize it. And once I did, I said, hey, I'm Jeff. And I introduced myself. I said, writing's the tough part, man. He goes, performing's the fun. It's the writing. And he actually gave me what I consider good advice. He goes, go get some funny friends and sit down and write with them. Because if you wait till you do it alone, I mean, it's on my calendar every weekend, writing time. And I got to admit, I don't always get to it.
That's the hardest part. And that's the most tedious part of the process, is sitting down and getting something funny on paper and brainstorming, expanding upon it, finding new angles and directions to take it in. I do have one question about that performance on Long Island. Were you on the East Coast of Long Island?
It's a club on the South Shore, East Coast of Long Island.
It was a callback to your mistake much earlier in the podcast. You said, I'm here on the East Coast of Long Island. So callback, referencing something that happened earlier.
And callbacks are my favorite. I love a good callback. Do you want to explain what callbacks are, just in case somebody doesn't know? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so someone will harp on something early in their comedy set, and it gets a big laugh, and then towards the end of the set, they reference back to it out of the blue.
And it usually is a real winner. I do a line about in the middle of my set about, once you go Jew, it's like you never knew. And that's how I also end my set. And that's usually a big laugh. I love that.
Got it.
You say that the right hook can get a prospect's attention, can be used in emails, in cold calls, on LinkedIn, voicemails, and more. Can you explain what's a hook, and why do we need to do it in 3 to 10 seconds?
Yeah, because people's attention spans are shorter than ever. And, I'm sure we've all been pitch slapped on LinkedIn, got some long rambling paragraph. It's like, I don't know who you are. You're just trying to sell me something. And I don't know why I should care. And you're not saying anything entertaining either. So that hook, this calls cold in the relationship between sales and marketing. I use that in my LinkedIn connection requests, my cold emails, my cold calls. I've sent the odd text with it, video messaging. I use it wherever I can. And I can adapt it to the channel. Sometimes I might even use it with someone I've already met. And I'll say, hey, if we hadn't met at that conference, this note would be cold in the relationship between sales and marketing.
Gotcha.
So it's a hook. It's a short, quick. Let's get them in here. Let's lure them in with something relevant.
John, do you work with individuals or only with organizations?
Funny you ask. I'm thinking about how to work with individuals lately, but I don't have a formal offer. When I started this, part of the idea was to help CEOs and maybe more technical people who speak at conferences, craft some humor, bespoke humor for their presentations. Always happy to help people if they reach out, but yeah, happy to help. Let's just say that.
Got it. Well, I'm going to share my screen now. Would you tell people how they can reach you if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I do not offer is PowerPoint design for revenue teams. So please ignore the bare bones slide that I provided Jeff with everybody. Do not judge me on this. My best place is my website, johnselig.com. I have use cases, testimonials, blog posts that expand on everything I've talked about here. A bunch of videos too. My YouTube channel has most of the videos. My website doesn't have them all. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, but most importantly, connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you think I could help your team, my email address is there as well.
And I don't know if you remember, but I said, gee, I had one more question, but I couldn't remember it before we went on. It was, is your name pronounced Selig or Selig? And clearly I pronounced it wrong.
That's all right. Don't worry about that. It's most people really, for a 5-letter name with no complex consonants or even vowels, people really mangle it. They'll say Selang, Selig. So Selig is totally acceptable, and I don't chastise people for that.
Got it. Any final bits of advice for our audience today?
Yeah, if you're going to succeed in stand-up or comedy, you don't need to be funny. You don't need to be the world's greatest salesperson. You really just need passion for failure. That's all you really need.
Got it. John, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I do and got as much out of it. And I'll end this as I always do. Gang, please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Thank you, John Selig. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody.